Okay, so now there's one other thing that we want to implement here, and that is to make sure that whenever the user has typed in some text, uh, if they cancel, we want to make sure that they really wanted to cancel because maybe they accidentally hit the wrong button or something. Just a little bit of a kind of a safety mechanism, but also it's a nice, easy way for me to show you how a dialog box works. So what we're going to do is whenever cancel is hit, we're going to check to see if there's any text inside that task field name. And if there is, then we'll present a dialog box to say, are you sure that you want to get rid of this? You've got some unsaved changes here, basically. Do you want to go ahead and add the task from here, or do you want to discard it, or cancel and try to figure out what you want to do from the same view? So the steps we need to do are, we need to add something that's called a text watcher to see if there's any text that has been input into that text box. And this is there's another simpler way to do that, given that there's only one form field, but I want to show you this way of doing it because it's more scalable, so you can add more form elements to this view and still make things work, and also use it as an update screen later if you wanted to, say, edit a task. And we'll discuss that in a second. And then if any text has been changed in that form field, then we will build an alert dialog and then present the user with that dialog and allow them to either add the task that they entered the text for, or discard the changes, or just cancel and dismiss the dialog. Okay, and all this is going to happen on the add task activity. So let me switch back there, collapse these imports, and then start setting up the view a little bit more. So what I want to do in this setup views method, just like I added some click listeners in the add task activity setup views that we're looking at, I want to set up what's called a text change listener. So this is another type of listener that's listening for some user input. And I'm pasting in some code for it right now, and then we can talk about it. So a text change listener can be added to the component type of an edit text. And what you do is add what's called a text watcher. I'm going to import that text watcher. Okay, looks like I wrote this code during 1.5, and now 1.6 added another piece to the interface. So text watcher is an interface that defines a couple different methods. Oh, well, that's weird. I guess that's not true. It didn't add one. I don't know why Eclipse thought that I hadn't implemented this method, but I sure did. It's right there. Just nothing happened inside of there. Okay, so again, the text watcher is an interface that defines a couple methods that will be called during different points of the user entering some text, or the text changing inside of an editable text component. And those hooks are on text changed, before text change, and after text change. So you get to hook into whenever a user is typing into an edit text field before the text changes are allowed. So you could use this to do something like disallowing certain characters. After text changed, you could hook in here and do some changes to the text as a whole. Maybe you would call a spell checker hook or something like that to if you wanted to do your own spell checking. But on text changed, what we're going to do, which is when the text is actually changed, is we're just going to set up this changes pending flag, which we want to be a field on add task activity. So I'm going to hover over here and click this, and it will create that code up here at the top. Basically, this add task activity is now going to track whenever there are changes to any of the form elements on the screen. And the reason I say this is a little more scalable is I could also just check to see whenever the user wanted to leave this screen if there was any text inside the add text or the task name edit text field. But what if I wanted to repurpose the screen as a way to edit an existing task, then I would already have text in there off the bat. So in this case, I want to track if there are any changes pending instead, and that's a little bit more flexible way to do it. So basically, this text change listener, to recap, is going to watch for any changes to the text inside that edit text and then say whether there are changes. And we'll be able to reference this variable to our benefit here inside the cancel method. So we're not just going to finish right off the bat once the user presses the cancel button. We're going to check first to see if there are any changes pending. So if changes pending, do a little bit of thought before we just let them go ahead and finish. And I'll put this inside of an else. Okay, so what we want to do, if there are some changes pending, is present the user with the dialog box that we looked at in our slide comps here. So it needs to have a title of unsaved changes, and the description or the text needs to be, would you like to add this task? And then I want there to be 3 buttons on the dialog, and this is a good practice to follow whenever you create dialog buttons. Apple gets this right, and I think it's in their human interface guidelines. A good practice to follow is just to expect that the user is going to be either not going to want to read your message in your dialog box right away, or be confused by reading it. If they look at the buttons and they see some sort of generic like OK or cancel, they're going to be confused by the whole process. So it's better to have buttons that are labeled with what you are allowing the user to do. So we're not going to say OK or cancel or something generic like that. We're going to say what the button's actually going to do. So each one of those buttons need to be labeled with the action that the user is going to take if they press the button. And those 2 actions are add task or discard, and then cancel will just be a simple dismiss the dialog button. So I'm going to paste in some code here to save some typing again, and then describe what I'm doing. So is anybody familiar out there in the audience with what's called the builder pattern? You see this a lot in Apache code. This is just sort of a kind of raise your hand type of situation.
We don't have any hands up in the audience.
Nobody's commenting in GoToWebinar.
Okay, so I'll describe this a little bit. The builder pattern is just an easy way to build an object with, instead of constructing the object and then setting a bunch of properties. It's sort of like a kind of a simpler than a factory method type of a thing. But I'm creating this new class, or an instance of this alert dialog builder, and then that takes a context, which is just this in this case. But then notice I'm going on to call a bunch of methods on the object that's returned there. So this is kind of a nice pattern to set up a process where you can construct an object and set a bunch of attributes about the object during the process where we're calling new methods on the builder, and then at the end of that whole process you call create and the actual object is created. So this unsaved changes dialog is going to be a type. I'm going to create a field out of it, but it's probably going to get the type wrong. It's going to say object, but I want it to be an alert dialog.
And so, Tony, the alert dialog is just structured so that it uses the builder pattern in order to create all of the pieces of it?
Yeah, well, it just helps me build an alert dialog. So I think I can just create an alert dialog on my own by saying new alert dialog, using its constructor. But then I would have to set up some things myself. And going through this builder sort of prompts you, here are the different things that you can do on it. It's just sort of a different way of setting up an object with some defaults before it's actually created. So I'm creating a new builder, but once I press create, it's going to actually return the type of alert dialog. Just bears a little bit of an explanation there. So a couple things that I want to do to this builder, or are to set up what the title is going to be, what the message is going to be, and then there's this sort of interesting process here that I set up the click listeners of the different buttons and also tell the builder how many buttons I want. I want to have a positive button, a neutral button, and a negative button. And those kind of defer or delegate to the SDK the positioning of where, as a standard, the user is always going to see the positive selection and the negative selection. So in like a OK cancel situation, you would say, I want a positive button and a negative button, but you wouldn't say you want a neutral button. And then the positioning, like left or right, is standardized by the SDK, so you don't have to worry about, well, should I put the OK button on the left, or should I put the OK button on the right, and where would a neutral button go? That stuff all standardized by using this builder pattern as well. And we want our positive button to be, yes, go ahead and add the task that I had typed in. And we want the neutral button to be in the middle. Well, it's going to be in the middle by the SDK, but what we want to do is just finish the activity at the instance the user clicks on that button. And then the cancel button, we want that to just cancel out the dialog, which is accomplished by calling unsavechangesdialog.cancel. That just gets rid of the dialog. So that's pretty much working the way we need it to, but we need to look at the it looks like Eclipse is complaining about this one again. Let me get rid of this. See if that makes it happy. Okay, so this negative button is all set up. That's the cancel button. Let's switch back here to the slides. That's the cancel button over there on the right. That one is doing what we want it to do. But you can see that there's a couple resources that we need to create here, and then I'll go through and talk through what else is going on. So setting the title is going to take a resource, and we want that to be set up inside the strings file. So an unsaved changes title, I'm going to copy that key and then open resource strings. And duplicate this line, unsaved changes title. We're going to say, just like the comps say, unsaved changes. And then I need another one for unsaved changes message, which is, as the comps say, would you like to add this task? So I'm going to change this string. And then there was also a discard, so I will add one for that. Now all those resources are there, then this there's no longer any problems here. And we're all set up. So the set positive button, add task, will call add task just as if the user had clicked the add task button. And the neutral button, instead of calling cancel, even though it's going to be labeled, well, it's going to do the same thing as what the cancel button used to do. It's just going to call finish because we don't want to get into an infinite loop here. So that's going to be the finish path, and then the neutral button will once again just dismiss the dialog. So let's go give that a try by running this from the big play button. Switch over to the emulator. It should be loading up here in a second. Now if I come here, now notice again, since we restarted the application, that the memory was gone, or everything was gone out of memory, so any tasks that I entered before are no longer there. When I type get milk and I accidentally hit cancel instead, we didn't wire that up yet. So what we need to do is, well, no, we did wire that up. So why is that not working? Let's do a little bit of checking here. So I want to make sure that this onText change is actually getting called. So I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. And run the application in debug mode. So now once I come over to add task and I hit get Melk, it should open up in our debugger. And yes, that's true. Do you want to open this perspective now? Yes. So now I am in the Java debugging perspective. Well, once Eclipse wakes up, I will be at least. Okay, and I'm inside of the click listener, and I should be setting changes pending to true. So once I step over this, changes pending. If I hover over this, well, it's pointing to the right place, but I can go up inside of actually I can't get a reference to that, to the activity. Oh, add task activity. I might be able to get up into that. So this .0 or $0 is an add task activity, and there's my variable changes pending is true. And then when cancel is clicked, if changes pending, then I should show this dialog. That's the problem with copying and pasting, or from not knowing what your code's supposed to do. There's one step that I missed. So just let me maximize this here. Just going through and creating the dialog wasn't enough to actually show it, so the problem was that I needed to call one more thing, and that is unsaved changes dialog.show. So now everything should be working. And we get this same, if I save the activity and I get this error that says I can't swap the code out running on the VM. So if you ever worked with Java in another situation, like maybe on the server, you can actually save changes inside of Eclipse and have those changes automatically uploaded to the running virtual machine and swapped out, but you can't do that inside the Android virtual machine. So I just say disconnect from the debugger. And now if I run this again, we should actually get our dialog showing up once the application starts over. And that was all planned so that you could see the debugger in action again, right? Okay, so now when I say get Melk, I accidentally hit cancel instead of add task. I'm asked, would I like to save this task? If I say cancel, the dialog goes away. I hit cancel again and I say discard, nothing is added. But if I say instead add task, then it says just as if I hit the add task button. And now we have a little bit of a guard against accidental user input. So, are there any questions? I'm sure someone would want to see the code here. Let me switch back to Eclipse and show the cancel method here. Any questions about what we did so far there?
Yes, we have a question from the chat room.
Okay. Somebody was wondering about the change spending flag and where that is set originally in the code. They're getting a little bit lost in the code.
Well, that's just a Java thing. I define it here on line 19 of add task activity. Whenever you define a Boolean, it's automatically initialized to false. That's a Java thing. So I didn't initialize it anywhere else.
I have another question about what's the difference between using the cancel button and using the back button on the device?
So we didn't hook this in because I'm going to be dealing with more specific, like moving around type stuff. Well, I guess I could talk through it because it's fairly simple. The difference between hitting the cancel button and it hitting finish and you hitting the back button is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. It's just that in our interface that we set up here, let me switch back here. So if I say hit the back button here, it's not going to go through that whole process where you hit the cancel.
On the edit text change listener, you don't check to see if it's blank, so that'll allow currently it'll allow an empty task to be displayed.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, just an oversight. So basically, we could do something like if change is pending, and I'd have to get this whole ugly string together. Where's add task? Yeah. Task name. Equals empty string. Not. Okay, so if change is pending and it's not blank, then go ahead with this. Otherwise, allow it. So yeah, that was just an oversight. Good catch.
Why don't you finish up then, and then we'll come back to some of the other remaining questions so that we can finish up on time.
Okay. So basically, just finishing up, these are the files that we added this time. We added, during the second process, because we didn't look at the ones we added. Since then, we have the new activity for add task, and then we have the superclass task manager activity, and the new layout add task.xml.